Hi, this is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in to Simply Enough.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period. Welcome to Simply Enough, where we celebrate you.
Because you are enough. Just as you are.
Period.
So what does that look like for joy in practice when we try to actually live it?
In no way are we talking about toxic positivity.
Or hit a roadblock. That fragile state of being didn't know where to go.
It's just a semicolon in my sentence of life. It's not a period.
And it's only for now.
The practice of gratitude has been measured to improve one's state of well-being.
The generals of joy are grace and gratitude.
100%.
Hello, welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Zachary Leonard.
I'm Elizabeth Ignacio.
And we are coming to you with a new hat on today. What do you think? You like my...
For those on the video podcast, I can see. You're looking good,
you.
Zachary.
We're
good.
Constantly encouraging all of our listeners to go check out the video because we are way more entertaining on video.
The facial expressions do not translate on an audio podcast.
And also, as some of you will come to definitely find out, I'm not the most expressive in my laughter, and often I will laugh silently. So there might be these pauses when it sounds like nothing is happening, but that might just be because Zachary's laughing.
Right. Or it sounds, and not just that nothing's happened, but actually that my joke died when really
never
Zachary's laughing.
Your jokes don't die, please. No. But yes.
Oh my God, don't set me up for that either.
Oh, that's true.
Don't set up that expectation.
But I do have a hat on today. I'm kind of excited about my little Newsies page boy hat. And, Elizabeth, I was thinking back to our last two episodes, which really are like partner episodes, right? Joy 1, Joy 2, part 1 and part 2. And after that episode had an occurrence that really brought back to mind what we had talked about, but then also I think challenged me to think more deeply about living in a state of joy, that it's a state of being, and thought that it would be relevant to tell that story and dig into. So it's going to sound like maybe even joy continued, but I think it's more of a practice, a direction practice rather than something a little bit more cerebral where we talk about joy. So I've been in the process of applying for jobs, and that's always just a difficult endeavor, especially if like I'm currently moving into a new industry or I'm branching away from a career path that is familiar. As I'm looking at these job descriptions and seeing where I think I fit and where I don't fit, there's still some uncertainty because I don't know the formula as much and somewhat unsure about how my experience in education can apply to some of these jobs and these newer industries. So I'm vulnerable at the same time, right? So I'm putting myself out there, spending time writing cover letters, readapting my resume, and then either you don't hear anything, which is its own form of rejection, or you do get a rejection email back. And that happened. So we taped Joy part 1 and part 2. And then shortly thereafter, after feeling really energized and juiced, to use your word, about what I was applying for in these positions and the potential opportunities that they may lay ahead, to get a couple of rejections was a letdown, right? And there was such a high in our conversation. I think our listeners and our viewers could feel it. Like we were really energized about the topic. And to go from that into, we're not going to move forward with your candidacy, or, thank you for applying, but, good luck to you. It was hard. It was hard. And so I wanted to bring that up today to talk a little bit about what that looks like for those of us who are maybe new to thinking about joy as a state of being, and what we do in practice, right? Rather than, okay, we know that joy is a state of being. We talked about it. And maybe we cerebrally believe it, but what does it look like when we try to actually live it? And so that's what I want to put out today is potentially for our listeners or viewers who maybe heard our conversation and, were feeling our energy and our high like me, and then walked into like a wall of hardship or hit a roadblock, and that, that fragile state of being didn't know where to go, or it hit a hiccup, or, the rhythm was disrupted. So what does that look like for joy in practice? That's what I would like to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, in fact, a practice. Before we even go there, just one reframing of what we were saying about joy and how, we went on and on, especially me talking too much. Sorry, everybody. No. But how joy is a state of being versus happiness, which is very circumstantial, based on the situation, based on what occurred, based on what you have. So very situational. A state of being is what joy is. So in knowing that, there has to be a realism to it. And what I mean by that I think it's important to clarify is, in no way, when we're talking about being in a state of joy, are we talking about toxic positivity.
Right.
So it's not, you're driving your car, to clarify something that I said in a previous, podcast. It's not that you're driving your car, your gas gauge shows that you're empty, and you stick a happy face sticker on that empty gas gauge, because no, it's not empty.
Right.
Okay. That's of no help. And actually there is toxicity to that denial.
Right.
So first and foremost, I just wanted to put that on the table, that we're not talking about you have to be up all the time. Because again, that's a false sense, a false narrative, and really a false state, rather than this steady state of joy. So if I can just put that out there right now, it's not about, again, rainbows and unicorns and, denial.
Right.
So even when we've used the phrase in previous podcasts, you find yourself in a situation, or you find yourself having certain emotions, and, our responses, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that's great that you're depressed, or that's great that you feel like crap because of these rejection letters. It's not to frame it that way, but it's just to say, and that's okay.
Right.
That is just this point on the map of the journey. It's just a semicolon in my sentence of life. It's not a period.
Right.
And that's the difference. Okay. So now, having said that, and having taken, I hope, toxic positivity and Pollyanna-ishness off the table. So there's no question that joy is a practice or a state of being. So it's like exercising, where you have to keep up the practice to stay in good physical health. So it's the same thing as staying in good soul health or good mental health and well-being. So rather than judging the workout and where you are for the workout of that day, again, step back and look at the journey. So would you ever expect yourself to be able, once you decide to run a marathon, to run the marathon the very next day, as soon as you lace up your shoes? No,
absolutely not.
Once you decide that you want to, start lifting weights a little bit, would you, or should you judge yourself because you can't bench 250 pounds that first day? No. So that's the same thing too, relative to, that's great that you had this high of joy after our Joy 1 and Joy 2 podcast recordings. Does that mean that is the level that you have to stay at? And if you're not at that level, then you're not a joyful person? No, because there is the reality of life. And so same thing in terms of, practicing. And one thing that we do know in terms of a tool, a tool that has been researched and measured relative to one's well-being is gratitude. And it's been said that it's not joy that makes me grateful. It's gratitude that makes me joyful. And so the practice of gratitude has been measured to improve one's state of well-being. And my daughter herself actually did an independent research project, for her school based on other previously executed research projects, measuring the effect of gratitude on adolescent well-being, especially now during COVID. And so she had this cohort of students go through a daily practice of gratitude for X amount of months. And she did a baseline study or baseline measurement of their level of well-being based on prior research. So she used those studies as a benchmark. Then they did the practice of gratitude, and then she measured them immediately after the period of gratitude exercises or gratitude practice was done. Then she did a follow-up afterwards, and then a follow-up afterwards. And what was discovered was that, yes, her research project corroborated what has already been done, which is that, yes, the practice of gratitude does in fact increase or improve one's state of well-being. But that it also, in the next follow-up round, was that it sustained to that point.
Wow.
But she also then had some people continue the practice and others not continue the practice. And those that did not continue the practice, even though they did see an initial rise, once they stopped that practice, they returned back to their baseline levels, much like exercise and working out, right?
Yeah.
So that's where giving yourself space and grace to recognize that it is a practice and not just something that, turns on like a light bulb, that it is a practice. Then that's how you can get to this steady state of well-being. So joy, at first, the key is to just be observant, acknowledge, where you are and have gratitude for it, but recognize also and give yourself space and grace that there are going to be during this practice initially peaks and valleys, highs and lows. But ideally with the practice, then the peaks and valleys get closer together till you get to a point of a steady state equilibrium. And that is your state of being, of joy, so that you become resilient. I almost don't even want to use the word resilience, because that almost connotes hardness and stubbornness to it. So I don't even really want to use resilience, but that's just how you get into the steady state. So that's one is just the practice, for example, of gratitude. And part of that practice is awareness and observation of whatever you are going through, and giving yourself space and grace for when you're not feeling, on the highs, that you're actually on the lows, and that's okay. So the second corollary to that is then, even when you're in the lows because of something situational, because life happens. I mean, we're not going to deny that situations happen in life. And even though happiness is situational and circumstantial, that is the reality of life, that situations, circumstances occur in life. But therefore, then again, objectively observe what is the meaning you're putting on that, right? Rejection, you've heard me say, rejection is redirection, or you get a no, then think next. Okay, that's cute. And that's an easy way to remember things. And so there's value in my little catchphrases, but how do you practice that? So again, in being, observing by giving yourself space and giving yourself grace and just observing the situation. What is the meaning you're putting on that rejection? If you're going to call it failure, what is the meaning that you're even putting on the word failure? If you can get to a point, and again, give yourself space that as it happened that very day, if you feel like shit, give yourself space and give yourself grace to feel that way. I'm not saying immediately turn it, but recognize that is an event and not an identity. So if we can flip or change in our minds the meaning that we're putting on a rejection letter, or the meaning that we're putting on quote failure, then we can switch our reaction to it. So rather than laying stake and laying claim to that, like as your identity. Just recognize that's an event. I'm not living here. This is not who I am. This is not my permanent place of residence. Right now, I'm going to just, pitch my tent. This is, the valley that I'm in right now today, but I'm not like laying a foundation here, and I'm not going to sit in this place, and I'm not going to argue for my limitations. I'm going to recognize and even celebrate the potential and the opportunities, because I'm going to lift my tent tomorrow and I'm going to move on, because it's not my identity. It's not my permanent residence. It's just where my tent is right now. Does that
totally
help?
Yeah. So many thoughts. The first is, have you ever seen the musical Avenue Q?
No.
Okay, so
that's with the puppets.
The puppets, yes. Yeah. So it's like an adult version of Sesame Street. So for all of our listeners and viewers out there that don't know Avenue Q, it's a very intelligent show, but it is a little PG-17 rated R. These are performers who perform with puppets, meant to be like Sesame Street, but it's very much adult themed and adult content. So if you do go and check it out based on this conversation, just know that maybe if you have little ones, they probably shouldn't be around as you're listening to some of the music. So just going to put
They'll
that
be like,
disclaimer out there.
Oh, it's Elmo. No, it's not.
No, it's definitely not.
Elmo doesn't talk like that and doesn't talk about things like this.
No, absolutely. But they have a song at the end of the show, which is called For Now, and it's only for now. And they go through a list of like, different examples, and it speaks to exactly what you're saying right now, is just this acknowledgement that things, like you said, are situational, right? The same kind of thinking when things are going well, right, is also just not taking them for granted, and also living in the awareness that, everything is situational, but there are through lines that we can anchor ourselves to. So if you want to check out a really good song, fun, entertaining, but adult oriented song that speaks to your point, that's a good one. It also is such a catchy tune that, to build off of your excellent use of little catchphrases, it might be, another little phrase that myself or anybody else can link onto, like, it's only for now, right? It's only for now.
Love it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun. I'll share the song with you later. But the other piece,
the semicolon versus a period kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like, the story continues, turn the page.
So that's a good segue into the next thought that I had, which is, I think I feel the most susceptible to the ups and downs in something that's new, right? There's a vulnerability, there's a newness to a new venture, to working out, to job applications. And that can, I think, lead me astray from seeing the bigger picture or seeing the situation, because I'm in such a place of newness and discomfort or insecurity or whatnot. And as a rock climber, there's so many different examples or correlations to this, because rock climbing is hard, and it isn't, and I've only been doing it really steadily for like 6 months now, but I realize that some days are just high gravity days or low gravity days. And rock climbers use that term to denote, for lack of a better way of catching it, you just kind of feel fat or heavy that day, which means that it's harder for you to get up the wall. But that doesn't mean that a day not on the wall isn't a day worth enjoying or recognizing. I mean, skiers say that too. A day on the mountain is better than any day not on the mountain. But so I was struck by what you were saying, definitely with the idea of something being situational, only for now. And the idea that newness can, I think, expose, I'm just going to speak personally, can expose me to maybe greater insecurity or even doubt or a feeling like that I'm kind of in this low or depressive state, rather than, yeah, it's new, this is going to happen, and yet I'm still pursuing something and I'm enjoying what I'm pursuing, and it is a state. So I just wanted to bring up those two aspects of what we're talking about, the newness and also the situational.
And we don't grow when we're comfortable. The growth and the possibility lies outside of one's comfort zone. And so if we can embrace that, or embrace might even be too much to ask, but if we can just observe and recognize and accept that that's part of it, again, that takes away the meaning that we're putting on the fact that something's new. I'll also say it's almost an oversimplification, which we all, myself included, use all the time, which is something is hard. And because we think, we all humans tend to think in polarity, you know, hot, cold, black, white.
Yep.
We think hard and easy are the only two ways to describe something. And this is where our little catchphrase that we've said in previous podcasts of, is it though, actually can be, it can be helpful. And this is not dismissive whatsoever. This, I mean this in terms of, you know, being helpful for reframing. Because something isn't easy doesn't necessarily mean that it's hard, because sometimes when we show up already thinking something's hard, we're almost already shackling ourselves from progressing because we are coming with the preconceived notion and expectations that something's hard. Something can be challenging because hard, is it though? You know, and again, not to be dismissive. So I'm just going to say what I say to myself, because I don't want to sound dismissive to you. But when I have that inner voice telling me things like, oh, but it's so hard. And, you know, I've admitted that, you know, the perfectionism, I don't use that as a compliment. Like, I know that that is actually something I need to work through and get over, to be honest, because perfectionism is this heavy weight of armor that I think is protecting me, but really is weighing me down and slowing me down. But rather than looking at something as hard, just because that's kind of the vocabulary that we go to, something's either easy or something's hard, just reframe that in a different way of it's challenging, it's an opportunity, and accepting that then almost removes the weight of the meaning of hard. And so what I tell myself is it though? I mean, hard is fighting cancer. Hard is watching your child suffer needlessly. Like, that's hard. So if I can, for myself, I'm only talking about myself, I'm not dismissing anybody, but for me, that really helps reframe, like, okay, that's too simplistic. I need to come up with a different adjective. Challenging. So just like, for example, stage fright, which I definitely have, it's amazing we're doing this podcast, but anyway, stage fright, or taking an exam or anything like that. You know, the biological response, if we were to put EEGs and check your vital signs and all of the true measurable objective biological response, did you know that it's actually the same for when one experiences feeling nervous and when one feels excited? So before stepping out on the stage, not for like when I do lectures as a professor, that doesn't bring about anything. Yet why, if I'm about to step out and sing, or I'm about to step out and dance as a performer, I'm stepping out on the stage. Why are the two different? Because of comfort level. Let's reframe that. Those feelings, those butterflies in my stomach and my heart rate racing and my blood pressure increasing, you know, I mean, literally, I actually took a blood pressure medication before I did the piano concert to calm me down. And not because I made that up. I mean, that's actually been shown in medicine, that rather than taking like an anxiolytic or like, you know, Valium or something, you take a blood pressure medication called the beta blocker. But anyway, rather than saying, oh my God, I'm so nervous, which begets more nervousness, you actually tell yourself, I'm excited. I'm excited. And that reframes everything.
Yeah. Wow. So for our performers out there, or anybody about to do something new,
anything
that is transformative. For singers, because I'm a performer, when you focus on being nervous, particularly when you sing, your muscles tense up, right? When you think about yourself being excited, there's actually, you can relax yourself through that. But you're right. When you think about yourself being nervous, your performance is ultimately
self-fulfilling.
Yeah. I like what you were saying about the polarization of things like hard versus easy, And it made me think about, I had a therapist for a while, just a fantastic therapist. And I was going to him primarily because I was dwindling down my self-worth to either good or bad. As if being a friend or being, a husband or being a teacher or administrator can actually be dwindled down into either good or bad. But it's very common for us to do this, to think about something as hard or easy or good or bad. And looping back to what you were saying about gratitude is if you can actually break apart something, an event, let's just say applying for a job, and which is still a big thing, but let's say, applying for a job and you get a rejection, rather than walking away saying, I'm a bad person, I wasn't, because I didn't get the job, breaking apart into like the different components. And then it's not en masse that I walk away, with this like belief about myself. I wrote a really good cover letter that I'm actually very proud of. And I use that cover letter, in other applications. And I also got feedback that my resume is strong. So to walk away and say, I'm not good or I am bad, when there are still strong takeaways that I can be grateful for, it can help me not polarize an event into hard or easy. Rock climbing. Okay. So for people who are rock climbers, when you put a harness on and you're going up the wall with a rope, it's called belay climbing. They oftentimes will be categorized with a rating scale that's 5 point something. 5.5, 5.6 tends to be among the easier routes, and then 5.11, 12 starts to get harder. I was doing a 5.10B route, which is one of the hardest ones that I've ever done. And rather than saying, if I don't get to the top, I failed, I can learn things along the way. So that I don't see this as I was good or bad at this event, but I can unclip from the wall and say, well, this worked really well. This is a new hold for me. And I can actually dissect it and analyze it, and then have more opportunities for gratitude and learning that I can say, like, not only is this situational, so maybe I didn't get to the top today, but I learned these new skills that will help me next time. But then I also have things that I can work on. Well, this one, I can go practice this a little bit more, whatever. Then I'm more of an observer looking at something outside of it rather than living in it and then owning it at the same time.
So there's, yes, 100%, because that's an inside joke, everybody. So a couple things. So if I ramble, these are the two things, and remind me. Okay. So okay. One, see, I'm already forgetting. So one was gain versus gap.
Yep.
And the other thing that I'm going to jump on right now is decathlete. Okay.
Okay.
So the decathlete. So it's funny how relative to, again, good, bad, yep, black, white, easy, hard,
right.
Same thing too, when we're talking about how we look at ourselves. So it's so funny that it's not funny actually, that if we're not quite as strong in one thing, that's what we're going to focus on and label ourselves a certain way, which therefore makes us feel, in terms of self-worth, self-love, self-value, right, pretty low on the scale. Yet there is so much more to each and every individual than one thing. So for example, for me, parenthood, orthopedic surgeon, mindset professor, and well-being coach, yes, teacher, professor, friend, daughter, like there's just so many. When you look at a decathlete, which many believe that the decathlete is the best all-around athlete, for example, so in the Olympics, well, that decathlete isn't the best in every event and every time. Sometimes they're stronger in this one event for this competition, right, and lo and behold, perhaps because of their shift in focus or just the lunar phase of the month, they're this other event at a different competition is their strong point.
Right.
We don't look at that decathlete and pinpoint and label the decathletes like, well, that's great that they're a decathlete, but what a sucky, long jumper. It's just like, wow, they're a decathlete.
Right.
So why can't we look at ourselves that way as well and recognize we're not just good or bad in one thing or the other.
Right.
It's not, our lives are not synonym, antonym. Like, it's not about, polarity. There's just so much more to us. So can we please give ourselves space and grace for the amazing, decathletes that we all are. We all are. And so if somebody is going to minimize you based on one of your events, that's that judge. Who cares? That's that judge, but if you are that judge of yourself, and again, the longest relationship you're going to have in your lifetime is the one with yourself. And wherever you go, there you are. That's where we need to have that judge, you, look at yourself as a decathlete overall. So I just wanted to say that relative to the polarity of good and bad.
Yeah.
The other thing that that was triggered when, you're talking about rock climbing and how having gratitude for, the journey and what was gained there, but also the objective recognition of what else you might want to work on, is this gap versus gain mentality. And, that applies in, again, dieting, weight loss, goal setting for a job, that kind of thing, which is, especially here in America. I can't speak to our international listeners and viewers. Sometimes I feel like we Americans need to be more like our international friends. But America is always so talking about goal setting. And that's great, especially if it comes from a positive place of growth, as opposed to shaming and blaming if you don't reach the goal. But that's what I'm talking about in terms of the shaming and blaming of reaching the goal is, okay, you have goal in mind, and you can look at that goal as you're starting off. And oftentimes what we see, for example, New Year's resolutions or weight loss or weightlifting or whatever, is there's an initial spurt of activity and progress.
Yep.
Okay. There are those that after, they're still kind of early on the journey, or maybe they're midway through the journey, but wherever they are, that point on the map, they either look at that goal and say, crap, look how far I have to go. And I've worked so hard and I've only come this far. I'm a failure. Then I'm going to take on that identity as failure, as opposed to it's an event of just where you happen to be right there. And therefore it's changeable if you want to.
Right.
That's an event. Whereas identity is something you carry with yourself.
Yep.
So that is the gap mentality of like, holy crap, look how far that gap is. Am I ever going to reach it? I suck. I'm too slow. Look at her over there doing so well. Look at him over there. He's smoking me. That's a gap mentality. Okay. Gain mentality is more, well, first of all, again, back to, it gives yourself space and grace and more self-sustaining, actually. So gain mentality is, okay, my goal is up there, but hey, look how far I've come. Okay. So my goal is that I want to lose 25 pounds, and okay, I've gained 5. I've lost 5. And so, okay, if I've lost 5, I can lose another 5 towards my goal of 25 total, as opposed to, oh, I've lost 5, but crap, I have 20 to go. Forget it. That's the difference in terms of gap and gain mentality. If we can espouse, embrace, engage with the gap mentality, with the gain mentality,
right,
as opposed to the gap mentality, not only does that help propel us, but we can serve as an example to others and teach others while we espouse this. So then actually we become the rising tide that lifts all ships.
Yep.
Those are the two things I wanted to say that I got from what you were talking about in terms of your rock climbing journey.
Well, so as you're rock climbing, it depends on how you feel about this, but the higher you go, if you do if you're comfortable looking down, you can literally see how far off the ground you are. Right now, that freaks some people out. So if you are new to rock climbing, just, be aware that if you do try to engage in a practice of seeing how far you've come, what you've gained, it may throw you off a little bit because you're literally looking at how high you've climbed. But, the point is still the same. Like, that is a very tangible way to recognize, like, look, I am 30 feet off the ground. I'm 5 feet off the ground. I'm 2 feet off the ground. I mean, that alone, you're taking huge steps in that one endeavor, towards your fitness goals or health goals, but you're also giving yourself tangible evidence of your progress. Mm-hmm. And that reminded me of something, and I've told you I've done this before. So I used to be heavy. I was 215 pounds at my heaviest, and I grew up wearing the husky sizes as a kid. And occasionally what I will do, because I still am somewhat body image conscious and whatnot, but I will, to remind myself of what I've gained, when I'm at the grocery store, I will take 5-pound bags of lemons or potatoes and walk around the store with them, and then literally put them back as a way of demonstrating, the weight that I've liberated off my body. And to also give myself kudos for, like, this is no longer something that I have to carry around with me. So for those of you who do have, to use your example, say you want to lose 25 pounds and you are at, you've lost 5 pounds, which is great and worth celebrating. Just take a 5-pound bag around the store with you and just see, like, you no longer carry that weight on with you. And even if you plateau, there are fitness people that talk about, like, the danger of the plateau, because it can actually, really destroy motivation. There's still gain in plateauing, which means you haven't regressed back at all. And so there's still motivation to be found in the fact that, like, no matter where you are, you have gained. Even if that gain is still in the same spot as it was before, there's still gain from where you started at the very beginning. And those are just examples in the fitness world. But pull up an old resume or pull up an old cover letter. If you're applying for jobs and maybe you're not getting the job that you want or that you're pursuing, but just see how far maybe your writing has come, or look at your resume from a couple of years ago versus now and see the experience that you've accumulated since then. Truly embodying a gap versus gain mentality with a focus on the gain, there are ways for you to just take a moment of reflection and see, yeah, you have gained a lot, rather than I'm so far away from blank or X or whatever my goal is.
Right. Pursuant to your particular current situation in terms of the job search and, these rejections and everything like that. Another reframing and self-check is, how are you seeing that versus how are the companies that are giving you this answer, how are they seeing it? What I mean by that was very poorly said, forgive me. So my daughter is a senior in high school, and she was going through the college application process this past year, and stellar candidate, but the type of schools that she was applying to, it's kind of a crap, everybody's a stellar candidate. Right. So I wanted to prepare her for whatever, for come what may. And so what we talked about is, the letter from the school, if it's a rejection, don't even look at it as a rejection. It's certainly not a statement on you if you're good enough for that school, because clearly, look at your, resume, accomplishments, your essays, all that kind of stuff. You're clearly good enough. So instead of saying, like, well, I wasn't good enough for said school, and that's why I got the rejection letter, reframe it. And, this is terrible because I didn't want to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I did want to arm her with this. Yes. So this was like a year ago, thank God she applied to, her top choice and got in. So I actually didn't even have to go through applying through other schools and go through this process. But I did feel comfortable that she was well armed had she applied elsewhere, by reframing that. Okay, that's that. If you get a quote rejection letter from said school, it's not because you inherently, your value, your anything about you is not good enough. It's just that, it wasn't a fit, or really, because as you know, I don't really like even using the word fit in, because I don't want to feel fitting in, because I think belonging is more important. Right. I just told her, if you were to get a letter that's quote rejection from another school, then that is just that for now.
Yeah.
Which is funny that you bring
Yeah.
up that song. I said, for now, it's just not a place, where you would belong.
Mm-hmm.
Or they decided that now is not the time for you to belong there, because each school has their different quotas and everything. And that's similar in terms of that's the teenage experience for their college application, but the same holds true for adults as you go through this application process. So rather than you got a letter saying, no, thank you, or we're not moving forward or whatever, it's not a reflection of you and your value. It's just, that's not a place where I belonged at this time.
Yeah. And
that way it doesn't take away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I am so glad that we went here today. Just for so many reasons. I'm grateful because not only do I have actionable items that I can take with me, things to think about, catchphrases, little like nuggets to help me recognize that whatever I'm in is situational, or yes, it's new, but it's only for now. And that, I still have gained a lot rather than to see what I don't have. I can see what I do have.
And the discomfort is part of it. And so, and that's okay.
And that's totally okay. And it's okay to say this sucks right now, or I've pitched my tent in an area that's junk, but I'm not going to be in this junk forever. And I think, your point about toxic positivity is also helpful, because I know for myself, I feel like I have to will myself through hard times rather than just acknowledge that, that maybe not even hard, like they're challenging, right? And even the difference between hard and challenging.
Or disappointing, or
yeah. So just this was chock full of really great and digestible and I think impressionable ways of thinking to get you through things and get you back into that state of joy, or right, that state of being. In addition, that if it's truly a practice, you helped provide really useful, tangible, actionable items to keep us in that practice. And that over time, yes, it does get easier and more natural, and we find ourselves maybe quote unquote rebounding. So that's not so many highs and lows, but it's just kind of like a steadier rhythm. I'm so grateful that we did this, and I'm so grateful that we brought this up today, particularly after we came out of such a really wonderful topic like joy. Yeah, so I'm just gonna stop. They're just gonna stop that.
No, that was really fantastic. Actually, no, you weren't stumbling. I was thinking, wow, you are so good. That is like the teacher administrator in you, like, you're so great about summation. So of course I'm going to screw it up by adding one more thing
please
to that summation, to bring it back to the state of joy, which is this, again, with polarity. State of joy, it isn't, is or ain't, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, again, like hot or cold, either or. So a state of joy is there, it's a spectrum in a way. And so even when you are, feeling disappointed or feeling frustrated or feeling sad, those are feelings, just like happiness is a feeling, again, situational. You can still be in that state of joy. So you don't have to also berate yourself relative to toxic positivity of like, oh my God, now I'm not in the state of joy. No. That's the whole point is, no, your sense of being is in this spectrum, this realm of being in a joyful state. You just might be on the lower end of it right now. And that's okay. So it's not like oh my God, I'm out of joy, and so now I must be depressed then. No, it's just, you can be on the left side of the spectrum, compared to, the right side, unicorn and rainbows. But it's still this shift of living in a state of being while happening to have a situational feeling of frustration or disappointment or sadness.
So it's almost like the generals of joy are grace and gratitude.
Love it.
You know what I mean by that?
Yes.
And compassion. Yeah. I mean, truly. And if you embed the idea of compassion in grace, that helps you withstand situational and a situational event or something, because not only are you coming from a place of gratitude, which will then lead to joy, right? But you're also giving yourself grace and acknowledgement of whatever the fleeting feeling of the moment doesn't have permanence.
Right. And back to the empty gas gauge in your car and putting a happy face sticker on it. The more we practice being in a state of joy and recognizing the difference between situational happiness or sadness and being in a state of joy, that's like, rather than waiting and recognizing that you're empty, that your gas gauge is on empty, and it's like, holy crap, where is the closest gas station?
Right.
If we practice this gratitude and compassion and grace, then actually that's like filling your gas tank more repetitively, so you never get to this panic state of empty gas gauge.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Yay.
And I think that's a great place to end it. I'm sorry. I'm like, I know there was silence there because I do live in a state of gratitude quite often. And yeah, so I'm just thankful for you. I'm thankful for this time together. And I'm also, and once we get our social media going and get to interact more with our listeners, I'm grateful for the ways in which they will bring to life what we're talking about, so that we have other stories that we can use as examples to share what the practice of joy looks like.
We'll fill each other's cups, all of us together. Rising tide tanks lifts all ships. Yep.
Yeah.
It will fill our gas tanks. Yep.
I think it's the hat. I think
gotta be okay. I'm thinking merch with like the Simply Enough logo.
I think you're right.
I see merch tattoo, in the future.
A hat. Although we do have to get cups, right? I mean, I'll work on that to go with our beautiful signs.
Yay.
So thank you, love. Thank you for our conversation today and just for being you.
I love you just as you are. Love all of you that are our listeners, viewers, our friends. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye.